AFS Artistic Director Richard Linklater. All right, a few words. Well, first off, thank you for being here. What else you got to do on a rainy Wednesday night? This is very special, what we're doing here tonight. I remember anticipating this film so much. You know, this whole series, I just talk about my own relation to these movies. And, you know, I was way into film by the time this came out. And I remember, you know, Leone hadn't made a lot of films in the last about 12 or 13 years before this. You know, his reputation, of course, is primarily based on what he did in the 60s in short order, you know, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, the trilogy, Good, Bad, the Ugly, and then Once Upon a Time in the West. You know, when I was first getting into film, I remember at the River Oaks Theater in Houston, you could watch, you know, twice a year they would show all three of the Dollar trilogy, or the Man with No Name trilogy, whatever you want to call it, the Clint Eastwood movies. They'd show them all together. They were very available, and those were huge cult films. So Leone was nothing short of a god. And the fact that he was making this epic that he had been working on for that whole decade. He produced films, but he wasn't really directing a lot. So the build-up to this Once Upon a Time in America was so exciting. There have been articles about it. I remember seeing a picture of him on the streets of New York, some, you know, New York in the 20s, and he had like a machine gun or something. It was just like so romantic. I just couldn't wait to see this movie. But the word, it's now known, the first thing you hear when you hear about this movie is, the studio recut it and it was this disaster. But I remember just really anticipating it a whole lot and looking forward to it. But by the time it got here, it premiered at Cannes in '84, was a, you know, standing ovation for a long time, and it played in Europe. But, you know, this is where the 80s is bad in the US, and I don't think anything is more typical than the way this film was treated, that the studio, well, what do you know, they screened this version that we're about to see, and American audiences in this time thought it was a little long, maybe a little violent, maybe a little brutal, and it is, it's all those things. So they panicked, and they recut it. It has this elaborate flashback sequence, so that someone had the brilliant idea they cut almost an hour and a half out of it and put it in sequential order. So that's the version I saw, and we all saw upon its release, and that was a big, I mean, I liked it because there's a lot of great stuff in it, but I didn't think it, you know, it was, and we already knew that it was kind of a truncated version, so that one came with an asterisk. So, but I remember watching it at the Village Theater over here on Anderson Lane and going, yeah, it was good. I don't know if ends meet, but it was, but then they immediately, when the video came out, and the critics knew about it, because a lot of critics had seen this version in Cannes, and the rebellion, the backlash against the studios was so swift and severe. I remember distinctly the year's best and worst list. Several critics put the best film of the year was Leone's, you know, long version of Once Upon a Time in America. The worst film of the year was the studio's cut, shorter version. You know, so it was like, boom. So by the time it came out on video, they started releasing. I think that's where I saw it. I'm so happy to be showing this because I'll admit, most of the films in the series, I can tell you where I was. I don't remember really seeing this, and this is probably because I saw it on video, the longer version. So this is my first time to see it on the big screen. How many of you are watching it for the first time on the big screen? I imagine a lot of us, if not most. So that's what makes it so special. And this was his passion project. Like I said, he spent he turned down The Godfather, he turned down so many things he could have been doing this was based on a book he read by an actual gangster writing under a pseudonym, the Hoods, I think, you know, Jewish gangsters. It takes place from the 20s to the 60s. Big story, epic, loyalty, you know, betrayal, De Niro, James Woods, Joe Pesci, Burt Young, you know, it's a great cast. Elizabeth McGovern, and then young Jennifer Connelly is the younger self. So you get these younger selves and older selves. And it's just so ambitious. So let's luxuriate in the sheer scope and ambition of this film. It was kind of the last of its kind. Studios really, I think, quit making films. I can't think of many more in the 80s that were this kind of film. They sort of quit doing that. So this is that. This is kind of like Leone's, it's his Goodfellas. It was very close to him and something he really felt like he wanted to say. But unlike Scorsese, who is from that neighborhood, you're getting it through his Italian, European perspective, and what he did so well with his Westerns. It's kind of the guy, I'm pretty sure I watched the video with, George Morris, an early patron saint of the Film Society. He was an early proponent of the opium hallucination flashback. You'll see what I mean. If you know, like the whole thing's this opium hallucination. But so it's beautiful, mythic, and I can't wait to watch it with you guys. So let's do this. All right. You made it. Whoa.
That's a real movie, man.
I know. I feel like we're all in an opium den now, man.
I wish we could roll out of here and go to an opium den.
I know. Does Austin have an opium den?
Yeah, Austin has an opium. I'll tell you later.
Yeah, there's got to be one.
Yeah.
That looks so fun.
Don't worry.
Looks
I'll hook you up.
relaxing. Don't worry. Need one of those. What a great.
That little smile at the end. That was Leone. Somebody asked Leone. Was like, "Was that your idea?" I was like, "No, that was absolutely not my idea." But it worked. We left it in.
The smile.
Yeah.
Well, he probably had options. I'm sure they did a lot of takes. It's a choice.
Yeah.
He could have froze the frame right before the smile. It's a big choice.
He said it was. He said, when you have an actor like De Niro, you just go with. There are certain things that you change. It has more complexity. Because originally because he'd been working on this since 1969. Originally he wanted Paul Newman and what's his Tom Berenger.
Yeah, he thought
Tom Berenger. Is that the guy's name?
It wouldn't have been then.
Who's the guy in Fear City? Tom Berenger. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the guy. Like
in '69, he wanted.
No. I'm saying later on, when it became a realistic possibility. The movie. Yeah.
Over the years, I think he flirted with a lot of different people. I forget, but it's interesting. That's his last image. Appropriate. It's a close-up. Leone, the master of the close-up, the eyes. His influence.
And it goes through the whole. You start when you know that a director's making a movie that he knows. If he doesn't know that's his last movie, he probably knows that's his last big movie.
No, why would he think that though? He was he died at 60. 6 years later?
Mm-hmm.
When I was young, 60. Oh,
there's
he was pretty old.
Feel to it though.
No, I think that's young. Oh, it's such a melancholy movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like someone's last movie.
Yeah. You feel like he had to know that it's.
So those Italians, like Salò, is definitely Pasolini's last movie. Do they know it's their last? Do directors know it's their last movie?
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
The Dead is definitely John Huston's last movie.
Yeah, that he knew, obviously.
Carell could be someone's last movie. Possibly. I'm thinking of last movies here.
But the whole thing goes to the open den, and you see there's the screen with the I mean that's obviously a metaphor for movies, and you're just like, so the screen with the shadow figures on it, that's what does it all mean?
I don't know. Anybody? We're all
yeah,
there.
somebody. Okay, I forgot we had this incredible resource. Somebody tell us what it all means.
All just kind of feeling it here. But God, first off, beautiful. God, what a gorgeous print.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like, of all the prints we've shown, and it is amazing we're showing a 35 print. In this day and age, this is the only place on planet Earth this is going on tonight. And, God, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Now, it's a more recent print.
That's from 2000. This was struck in 2003.
Right, from the new. This film's had such a interesting.
Can you guys believe? I mean, it's late and we're all
we'll keep
stretching out and tired a little bit, but there's a version of this that's 50 minutes longer. Not 15, 50 minutes longer.
But this was Leone's favorite. This was his.
Yeah,
because that one, he talked about making it 2 movies or 2 parts or. But I heard because. Bertolucci had done that a few years before in '76, 1900. Been a kind of a notorious flop too. So I think they weren't thinking that was the way to do it.
Yeah, and Leone said that this was the one that he signed. He said you could take that other one and you could spread it out and put it on TV in 3 nights or something, and that would be fine. Like Close Encounters, the special edition or whatever. But this is the one that he signs. Yeah, and
God, I had forgotten so much about this one. When you see a film on video, especially back then, it was probably some VHS copy or something. I just I wish I would have had a chance to see it in the theater. It's just such a different experience.
Like you look at
just
this movie. This movie, like
The
it cost
pace
$1
of
billion, right?
You need to be in a theater in a big. It's a big movie. The pace of it and the detail. Yeah, it would just be a shame for your memory. That's probably why I don't remember it. Watching it on a small screen, I don't care. Even if the screens are bigger now, but God, this is such a movie, and it feels like the last of its kind in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
no, this is. I mean, Heaven's Gate had happened. A lot of this theories over the last year and a half is like how the industry changed so much, and how there just wasn't room for really movies like this anymore. They had learned their lesson, and Hollywood had really, changed so much. Heaven's Gate, they weren't really in this business anymore, and I think the way they handled this in the U.S. anyway, it's so telling that worldwide, this version or one closer to it played with acclaim. I don't think it was ever a huge hit, but I think it did okay.
Yeah.
But the way it was treated in the U.S. is really shameful, and I think the studios kind of learned. Just take your losses. Don't screw it up too bad. Maybe it'll get good reviews, and But it was kind of.
Well, we say it's kind of the last of an era. It's not like why will it ever come back? Will it ever happen that movies are like great artists can make great big movies anymore?
It's just I'm trying to think in the second half of the 80s, like in the first part, we had Reds, which we showed last year. This is kind of a also such a wonderfully ambitious, intelligent adult movie. We have our epics now, but they're just for kids.
Yeah.
All the money and resources, they're in theaters today.
Not a single 14-year-old was like, here's my money. I want to watch Once Upon a Time in America.
It's not even for young. I mean, this is, wow.
Yeah, when I was 30, I was like too young for this movie.
Yeah, I realize now in my 20s I was much too young for this movie. It means it resonates so much more now. So, I mean, that's not a movie audience. Any studio's going to go after.
Is this depressing? Because it seems depressing.
Yeah.
This seems depressing to me that Hollywood is like all for 14-year-olds.
Well,
I watched that movie over and over when I was 14 on cable.
This?
I'm not sure why.
Do you remember it? It was a 14-year-old.
Yeah, it was on HBO. They showed it over. They showed the truncated one, then they showed this one, and I was really obsessed with it. But I forgot a lot about it.
Yeah, I wonder if you were watching this version. Well, it has so much of the movie is 14-year-olds. I don't know how old those kids are.
The kids.
Yeah, those are really wonderful performances. Noodles, Jennifer Connelly.
The truncated version started with the kids.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that. So I like the kids because I was a kid.
Yeah, how idiotic is it to take the whole thing and spread it out on like a logical timeline?
Yeah,
that's the dumbest thing anybody ever did.
I saw that version, and maybe I'm misremembering, but at the end he's walking out. Does anyone remember? And there's a gunshot. Yeah. Was that right? Like, so implying he killed himself. Yeah, and I was wondering here, but I remember De Niro reacting to the shot. He kind of went, so they must have filmed it, but I don't know what. I don't know how that would fit. How they used that. It was like a different ending, but they must have filmed it. I don't know. Very confusing.
Is the longer version available?
The longer versions, I think they put it out on Blu-ray. You can't book it in the States. You can only book it in Italy for some reasons that came up since Cannes. Some legal reasons.
Yeah, there was like the rights to that extra footage. There's some controversy or some kind of.
They copyrighted a substantially new version of the film, so there's like a new copyright that like the clock starts now, appropriately enough for the metaphor for the film of that film. So that's copyrighted, but it doesn't apply in the States for some reason.
Wasn't there a new screening just a couple years ago in Cannes? De Niro and Elizabeth McGovern. Like how many? Just recent. A couple years ago. Yeah. 3 years ago. Yeah. And that was that this version?
Nope, that's the new version.
The new longer.
That's the new 50-minute longer version.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, someday that will come to American shores if they can work out the copyright issue. I wonder if we have any questions, contributions, anything. Yeah, right over here.
Say from Heaven's Gate on, are there any movies that come to mind where the director in the specific movies had the final right to cut, where it's definitely what they wanted and intended to be seen in to American audiences?
Yeah, because they did the same thing with Heaven's Gate. it was released briefly. Studio pulled it, made a much shorter version, threw it out there equally. It didn't do well, and then it got to live its second life based on the original cut. So, since I know Warren Beatty, that was his cut of Reds.
He had an incredible amount of power, though.
Yeah, I can't believe Leone didn't. And this had to have been financed a lot out of international money.
Sure.
Arnon Milchan, the producer.
I'm sure they went and sold territories, and they
Yeah,
probably had
so-
enough fuck you money that they could have a final cut.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Warner's had probably put in just enough that they controlled the U.S. Like he probably didn't have final cut in the U.S. or something.
Right.
And it's too bad that
Does Final Cut still
Yeah.
exist? Does anybody have Final Cut anymore?
I do.
You've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
You've got a track record.
I mean, especially if you keep your budgets super low, they
Sure.
don't really care.
But does like Michael Bay or somebody have Final Cut?
Yeah, I think he's probably so aligned with what the studio wants.
Right,
That
yeah,
it
it
doesn't really matter.
It's a move point.
Yeah. No, a lot of people have Final Cut. It's not. It's more political. I think you can get. I think because of these disasters that happen. I'm just speaking personally. I think people like my generation, studios know it's really ugly. They screwed over Peckinpah, Wells, the history of Hall of Fame directors who got screwed over. It's so ugly, and the new generation of studio bosses. They're students of film history. They don't want to be that person. So what they do is you kind of get your cut. They just don't release it, or they kind of don't distribute it properly.
Oh yeah, that's happened. We know
So
of a couple instances.
you can get your film made, that's good though. At least you have can get your film out of it.
It just might get dumped in
They
like
punish
30
you.
locations.
Yeah, they punish you, and that's not just studios. That's kind of the indie world too. Jarmusch talks about that with Dead Man. Like the Weinsteins. Harvey was like, "Man, you got to cut 20 minutes." And he's like, "No, deal's a deal." He's like, "Okay, fuck you."
Well, the Weinsteins certainly
that
learned their
happens.
lesson, I think. Cut that
I
off
don't know. I
the
have
tape.
never worked with them. But no, Paul Thomas Anderson, there is hope. He got The Master made only a few years ago in 70 millimeter.
Yeah. That's kind of incredible. But
Pretty
now,
incredible.
like he kind of did it. He kind of spent that.
He just did it again.
Cash.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
Right
Some
over
people
here.
are blessed.
How much is known about the extent to which Leone made like this movie and Once Upon a Time in the West as sort of a specific commentary on America, or did he see America as sort of a metaphor for something else? Like, was there a political aspect to it?
What is, in Leone's mind, what is America a metaphor for? Just corruption, greed. Yeah, I mean, look, even in the Westerns, it's pretty fascinating to kind of see it filtered through his. And his is also filtered through, it's not just American history. And this book is based on supposedly an actual memoir. The guy who wrote it, unlike The Godfather, which is kind of myth at the literary level, this is based on someone's memoir who lived in that time, who was a gangster, Jewish gangster. So, but it's filtered through, Hollywood and cinema and the myths that he, as a European, I'd say German, like Wim Wenders films feel that way, and he talks about it a lot too. Just, the Yanks have colonized our subconscious. It's such a big influence, Hollywood, on them, that when they go to make films in the U.S. or what they say about the U.S. And Leone ended up not shooting in the U.S. much. I think he only shot a few exteriors, some of those streets with the bridge in the background. But mostly I think they shot it at Cinecittà, in Rome, and sounds like a little bit in Canada. I mean, there was another crew in Montreal for a little bit, I guess.
That bridge was forced perspective.
Who knows? If I would say, it's clearly before the CGI era, but I don't know. I think they might have actually done some streets in the Lower East Side or something, but I don't fully know the production
A lot of them
history.
still did look like that then.
Yeah, you could kind of, decorate a street in that way, art direct it, and get the extras. But yeah, he didn't shoot a lot, and he didn't really even speak English ever. So that's his Italian viewpoint. But the themes he deals with is there's a certain ruthlessness to the American West, and I think he sees that in the American spirit. you see it in the 19th century, films he's depicting, but then you see it in the 20th century that he's depicting here too. So he just has some view of human nature, I guess. I don't know. I'm just
of most of the Italian genre directors, he was like probably the least communist of them all, actually, because it was Sollima and Damiani, and a lot of those guys were like card-carrying communists.
Yeah, his politics are. I mean,
you get a feeling of his America. It feels like a land of hope and opportunity, actually, kind of, and like in a way, he's sort of depicting like this kind of cancer on it.
I know. Well, those aren't good guys.
Yeah.
Just kind of like the heroes. Clint Eastwood in those movies. They're very morally ambiguous. Leone kind of threw out the Western, and that's why they think they kind of hated him in his day or dismissed him, I guess, is the common wisdom. Like those films they did, the trilogy, Once Upon a Time those are such brutal depictions, especially Once Upon a Time in the West.
Well, it kind of harmonizes with that. Where like in Once Upon a Time in the West, Fonda's gang wears like the handkerchiefs over their faces. Yeah. It kind of harmonizes with that in an odd sort of way, that they're this band of ruthless outlaws.
Ruthless, but there's really he really got rid of the white hat, black hat.
Yeah.
The good guy at the back. No, they're all kind of
this moral sludge.
The power of cinema. They seem to be our protagonists. They are the people we're identifying with, or seeing the story through, but you question them as well. I mean, geez.
The nobility in movies exists in being watchable, really. So it's like it becomes like in his movies, it's like who's the most watchable? It's like, I guess that's the hero.
Yeah.
Like who's the most interesting face? It's like, okay, well that's the one we'll follow. Right back here.
Yeah, I read that he was supposed to be really fanatical about the script and writing and rewriting and rewriting. And I was surprised at the beginning credits. There were like 6 or 7 writers on this. And I'm curious if you think was that like a collaborative, or was it more like, do you think different people took different parts of the script and, with the idea of bringing it all together?
It's almost an Italian tradition. If you see like an Antonioni film, there's always 3 or 4 writers. And the director's always one of them. Yeah. Fellini, there's often a group. I think they did, I don't know, but and this one might be, instead of 3, and you really do think there's maybe 3 people in a room, but there's so many, I think over those years, he probably had various rooms that he was a part of with different people.
Evidently, it did take several years to write these things.
I wouldn't.
I suppose he kept writing and rewriting many times.
It feels that way. It's so complex. It's kind of. I love Tuesday Weld's character too.
She's tough, man.
She's so interesting. Wow.
And what a great performance too. She's great.
It's just so planted. Like the first story that Burt Young tells is kind of like, oh, he's already being set up. It's very complex. I usually don't understand things so easily, but wow.
On the subject of writing, when you look at
puzzle,
Once Upon a Time in the West, like this, like Bertolucci was one of the writers on that. Dario Argento was one of the writers on that.
Yeah, and also you got to give it to the Italians. They have a wonderful assistant directors kind of work their way up to get to make movies. Leone spent, he was an assistant on or PA or whatever the lowest rung on the Bicycle Thief for De Sica, and he worked in the 50s. He was on a lot of movies.
He was on Wyler's Ben-Hur.
Yeah, he worked a lot of those big American productions that came in. He was working there, so it was quite an apprenticeship process. And I think Bertolucci was Pasolini's assistant. There's this great tradition there. So you don't really have it in most other countries.
It really was just kind of this bootstrapping thing where people could work their way up, and as Leone did himself, working up to assistant on.
Yeah, and then pretty soon it's like, hey, someone's sick or they don't like him. You're now directing the movie, and that happened have you ever seen his earlier films?
Yeah,
Colossus
Rose.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, that's the only one with Rory Calhoun. No.
I've never seen it, but he kind of disowns it. He said he just did because he was kind of working there, and they needed a director or something. But
his movies took a real spike up because Fistful of Dollars isn't great, but then for a few dollars more is so
in
good.
those quick 3 years, it's like he really found his voice and his vision and everything. But
great director.
Yeah.
I wonder if we have one other sparkling contribution or question. Let's take it right over here. Yeah.
Well, it's something like the theory that I think you might have mentioned on your way up there. The whole opium hallucination theory, I think is interesting, and that has like colored my last 2 viewings of this and made it even better. Could you talk about that theory and where do you think, what point of the story you think that kicks in?
I don't know. It was like I threw it out there because George, one of my mentors there, he talked about that a lot. But I guess I don't totally understand it. You know, is it? I mean, where do you go with that? Is he having that in the 30s, right after those guys die?
Sketch this theory
Is
for
the
us.
future a hallucination? I don't know.
Well,
It's just some
I
thought.
just heard it somewhere that
Yeah.
like there's some theory, because it wouldn't have just been who you heard it from, I think it's kind of just out there, that a lot of the ending of the film is
Well,
him having a hallucination in the opium den. That's how come he has all this closure that he wouldn't really have, and she hasn't actually aged a day in 30 years. And so I think it's an interesting way to look at the film, and
so it's just his mind.
it
You
makes
know.
some of the stuff maybe less contrived, but you just kind of wonder, like, at what point does that take over, and from what really happened.
I don't think he ever spoke of that. But I think when you bookend your movie in such a way, you're begging for that, in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. And it's full of so much sort of out there material at the like the whole Cleopatra thing and all that. That starts feeling really out there,
Yeah.
and it departs from the realistic tone from other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been amazing. It's been
Yeah.
incredible. Do
What
we
a
have any
unique
final
experience.
thoughts that we'd like to?
What's next week?
Next week is River's Edge, right? River's Edge.
Yeah, I forgot for a second. Yeah, River's Edge. Well, that'll be great. A week from tonight. Different gear, but yeah, how special is this? I mean, as I'm realizing just the power of film. I mean, not that, it's just the constant reminder that I couldn't remember where I saw this version before, which told me I saw it fucking in a living room somewhere. Whereas this screening, we will all remember, I think, for the next 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
So, all right.
See you next week. And thanks to our sponsors, Trunkworthy.com.